Hello everybody, it's Max with Crypto Talk Now. Quant's interoperability is basically the slogan, if you will, when it comes to Quant. Every time you hear any topic about Quant, 9 times out of 10, they're going to mention one key thing, and that's interoperability. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into today's video on just that, Quant and interoperability. So as you can see right here, this particular gentleman comes straight from CBOS, right? And actually, I should say he's actually with Swift, but it was at the CBOS event. And we're going to take a moment to basically look more into this because it's one thing for me to explain interoperability to you, but there's another thing to actually have Gilbert Verdian give you countless different examples on how Quant solves that interoperability problem. So let's take a moment, about 2 minutes and 20 seconds, and then we'll kick it right back.
CBDC DLT networks can be interlinked, and not just with each other all over the world, but also with existing payment systems.
Overledger is an operating system. It's an overlay. It sits on top of blockchain and existing networks.
And all of that, we're achieving it through Swift's new transaction manager that is acting as a bridge.
Our technology is the bridge to be able to securely interconnect and interoperate between different networks.
That is acting as a bridge.
So we can actually be the bridge between different jurisdictions.
CBDCs could also aid in upgrading and connecting payment systems, both domestically and across borders.
For us, it's a privilege to be able to work with this technology and lay that infrastructure where this technology will live on. It's quite transformational to lay the tracks for the future of money and the future of transactions. So what we've been doing is making sure that these currencies that the governments will issue and these central banks will supervise are interoperable. That's core to our technology.
Central banks' digital currencies to be interoperable.
What's Quant's role in relation to CBDCs, either wholesale or retail?
I suppose you meant Gilbert, not us. I think so. Yeah. We're an infrastructure provider that creates interoperable digital assets, and it just depends on the different types of customers on what they need. One of the technologies we've got is actually being able to create an asset that is at its birth interoperable. So you don't need to have we call them hacks to mint and burn and all these sort of things. The asset can run on multiple blockchains at the same time.
Can be interoperability the same way you would transfer euros from one country to another, with all the benefits of having interoperable systems.
It's interoperable. We can connect any to any in terms of existing networks, blockchain networks, different technologies.
They work across borders in a frictionless way.
So it's just that, countless different examples of what Gilbert Verdian basically mentioned and so on. We're going to get a little bit more into, of course, just that. I loved how this was basically set up with these particular little clips of how he gives those different examples, whether it's some of his Zoom meetings, let's face it, whether it's some of the other interviews he's had and so on. That example of that particular individual from Swift, for instance, with the whole thing with CBDCs and so on. I know that's kind of a different example, but if anything, you saw or got the gist of how it basically is that, interoperability and how, different blockchains are able to talk to each other and so on. If you think about it, right, if Quant, I should say if, it basically is, but if Quant is an operating system, which it very well is, well, then it needs to be compatible with other blockchains and whatnot, right? And have them talk to each other without there being any of that problem. And they do just that. And if anything, check out the other video that we did in regards to Quant, where it outlines some of just that. A little bit more in regards to the hot topic of Quant and so on. Of course, I love hearing this particular part where it mentions the standard, right? Quant is the standard for global, ISO 222 and so on. Of course, people have said in the past, Quant isn't officially ISO 222. Listen to this from Gilbert himself addressing the whole issue of, just that ISO, for instance, 222. So we're going to, of course, take another moment to reflect on that. I want to go over this whole thing about, for instance, blockchain distributed ledger technologies, the whole 9 yards. So let's go ahead and hear this, and we'll kick it right back in.
Yeah, so I can say us as a company, we're the standard for interoperability. So we actually shape what interoperability looks like globally at the ISO level. So at the very high end, interoperability at the ISO level is governance interoperability, business interoperability, and technical. And then on the more technical side, we're part of Quilt in Hyperledger Foundation, and we're doing the Quilt reboot. And so what we're allowing to do is to have a choice of interoperability by having a framework. So using our technology in the front, you have a single API, a single gateway to all the different blockchains, and then you're able to pick different modules and different use cases of interoperability that you need for that particular purpose. And so we're shaping that to give people choice. So there's no one form of interoperability. It's not a technical thing. An atomic swap isn't interoperability. That's one use case. What we've done is we've created universal interoperability. Yeah, so I can say us as a company, we're the standard for interoperability. So we actually shape what interoperability looks like globally at the ISO level. So at the very high end, interoperability at the ISO level is governance interoperability, business interoperability, and technical. And then on the more technical side, we're part of Quilt in Hyperledger Foundation, and we're doing the Quilt reboot. And so what we're allowing to do is to have a choice of interoperability by having a framework. So using our technology in the front, you have a single API, a single gateway to all the different blockchains, and then you're able to pick different modules and different use cases of interoperability that you need for that particular purpose. And so we're shaping that to give people choice. So there's no one form of interoperability. It's not a technical thing. An atomic swap isn't interoperability. That's one use case. What we've done is we've created universal interoperability. Yeah, so I can say us as a company.
All right, so there you have it with that. A little bit more, of course, on the topic at hand, interoperability, right? And I liked basically how he went into more detail on just that, and of course, touched on the topic of ISO 222 as well. A little bit more in regards to all this. How about this? Quant basically being the standard. So when we blow this up a little bit further, right? We're always, of course, talking about this whole thing with ISO 222, but check out this thing, for instance, with CEN, CLC, JTC 19. I think that's another big thing because that basically covers all of Europe, right? So blockchain and distributed ledger technologies, you do basically see what is also going on in the Netherlands, the community, and so on. But when we kick it to this next side, this kind of breaks down and gives you a bigger perspective of the blockchain standardization initiatives, right? So it's kind of like you got to turn your head a little bit, but nonetheless, I mean, you do see where it's basically just covering all of ISO slash TC 307 and so on, some of these other ones and so on. But as far as hitting all of these particular ones, like it mentions here, the terminology, privacy, and personally identifiable information protection. We're always talking about the speed and so on, right? But a big factor is definitely the security risks, threats, and vulnerabilities. It basically reaches all this identity management, reference architecture, some of these other ones, right? We're always talking about smart contracts and crypto, right? Security management of digital asset custodians. Again, interoperability, right? The topic of this particular video. Of course, governance and use cases, and it just basically blankets all that. A little bit more in regards to all this. So it said, this was from Gilbert himself. So it says it started back in 2013 to make blockchains compatible with ISO 222 to interoperate with existing financial systems, which led to establishing ISO TC 307, of course, in 2015. And I know it's kind of hard to see some of this, but if anything, on this particular diagram, the following diagram basically explains the scope of the proposed suite of standards to allow interoperability and governance across blockchains. And Quant is basically solving just that. They're continuing to do that, right? It mentions, of course, back then that the existing standards at the time basically leverage existing work. A proposed approach can be similar to, for instance, what you see with Swift with ISO 222 standard, which defines the fields and controls within messages and transactions between entities, thus allowing interoperability. A little bit more in regards to all this on the topic, of course, just that interoperability. The interoperability standardization collaboration, possible framework for collaboration, interoperability, quote, stack. You see this, how this is kind of broke down, I should say. You have ISO at the top, and then some of these other ones that you see here with the standard bodies, and then how that breaks down to, you know, the industry standards. On top of that, the technical standards, and then how that is also brought down to be an open source for the community. And if anything, you want it to be open source because if anything, like, you know, they mentioned before, like having like an SDK, software development kit, and so on. You want to be able to provide this to the community so they can build more upon it. Because if anything, when communities get involved, it's a good thing. I think it's a win all the way. So again, I just wanted to, of course, bring this to you guys in that regard. One last one before we kick more into it. This is kind of cool. I mean, it sounds kind of controversial, but if anything, I mean, you know, this was a recording from, you know, what happened with the Fed and so on, basically with Chairman Powell and so on. So I like what Quant Papa says right here. He says, you know, Quant, for instance, I wonder what's going to take to solve just that. I mean, come on, it's Quant. But anyway, before we wrap things up, listen to this particular piece, and then we'll be right back.
A number of constituents have expressed the concern that we're going to end up with two systems that are not fully interoperable. And to the extent that employers and financial institutions and other participants would be plugged into different systems, if they are not fully interoperable, there's a real concern that that is going to, at a minimum, diminish the ability to innovate in these systems going forward. So I guess I'm wondering if you could just briefly, because I do have several other topics, just address the question of whether it is a priority of the Fed to ensure that the FedNow system will be fully interoperable with the clearinghouse system.
I think full interoperability is the goal. It will be challenging to reach it, but it's high on our priorities to assure interoperability. It's something we're very focused on in the designs.
A number of constituents have.
So there you have it. I mean, if it really is on, you know, Jerome Powell and the Fed's priority to find what's interoperable out there, right? You need to look into Quant, Chairman Powell. So with that said, guys, glad to be able to, of course, bring you this Quant coverage for the day. And if anything, it should give you a broader perspective on how Quant is interoperable on a mass scale, right? So guys, like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell notification if you haven't done so already. And by all means, check out the live show, which is Crypto Talk Now, every day of the week, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. We talk about various different hot topics in crypto, not just Quant and so on, but other ISOs. We try not to stick too much to like the meme tokens and so on because we feel as though that was so 2021. You know, we talk about some of these other ones and so on. But it's just that we cover a lot of crypto news. So we love to, of course, have you come on by, check it out for yourself. And again, thanks for watching today's video, guys. Y'all have a blessed day, and we'll see you on the next one.